Scottish Labour will urge the government today to clarify whether a grooming gang inquiry will be held and a call for an independent oversight of Police Scotland's review.
Well, this comes as Professor Alexis Jay is warning that too little is known about child sexual exploitation in Scotland and that an investigation could lead to a full public inquiry.
This important interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your money and your identity. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code here to get ExpressVPN right now and save up to 73% on annual plans today. Right, let's get back into it.
Well, our reporter, Charlie Peters, who's right across this grooming situation, right across the whole country, and he's there, and you have a guest with you this morning, Charlie, to talk about this.
That's right. Good morning, Eamon and Elliot. Joined by the Labour MP for East Kilbride and Straven, Joanie Reid, because this is a significant moment in Scotland for the grooming gang scandal. As we know, in June, the Prime Minister launched this inquiry across England and Wales, but Scotland's not included. There's been widespread political debate north of the border about whether a fresh inquiry will be launched there. In September, the First Minister, John Swinney, said he did not think one was necessary, and there has been some campaigning taking place up there in reaction to that, with Joanie being a big part of it. Good morning, Joanie Reid. Talk to me about what we're expecting from Scottish Labour this morning, taking this argument to the government in Holyrood.
So Scottish Labour have brought this debate to the Scottish Parliament, and they're demanding that the Scottish Government finally makes a decision, and they're asking them to now hold an independent inquiry into the extent of child sexual abuse and exploitation in Scotland. It comes after months of calling on the Scottish Government to do something. Their position keeps changing. So what Scottish Labour is saying is, you know, enough of putting victims through this trauma, listen to them and grant the investigation that Scotland so desperately needs.
While the government in Scotland has resisted this investigation, we have heard from some survivors, with GBNews speaking to one victim known as Taylor about her experiences in Glasgow, but also the Bradford victim and campaigner Fiona Goddard. She has told us about how she was trafficked to Glasgow as well. These stories have exposed the extent to some degree of the scandal, but we've also heard from Alexis Jay this morning, the professor and the social worker, saying that we don't know the full extent of the problem north of the border. Is that why you think an investigation is needed? Yeah,
we don't know the extent of the problem. We have far less understanding of the extent of the problem than you do in England and Wales. You've had the Rotherham Review, you've had the Independent Child Abuse Review run by Professor Alexis Jay, you had the Baroness Casey Review, and now you've got a national inquiry. Scotland has been subject to no such scrutiny. And as you say, we've had victim after victim after victim come out in Scotland. We've also had recent prosecutions, one in Dundee of a gang who were exploiting and raping young girls. We've had one in Glasgow. So the anecdotal evidence is that it's very much a problem in Scotland, and the Professor Alexis Jay, who is a prominent expert, in fact, the UK's leading expert on child abuse and exploitation, has been used by the Scottish Government to defend their refusal to call for an independent inquiry. Well, Professor Alexis Jay announced last night that she does indeed think that Scotland requires an independent review or investigation. So the Scottish Government's defence has just blown up in their face. So they now have to actually do something to protect and get victims justice. And
there's been some controversy about where Alexis Jay stands on this issue, because the Scottish Justice Secretary, Angela Constant, said earlier this year that Professor Jay does not want an inquiry or probe into the issue in Scotland. Talk us through how that's changed.
It's an absolute scandal, actually. The Justice Secretary spoke in the Scottish Parliament when an amendment was laid asking the government not for an independent national inquiry, but just to look into, just review the situation in Scotland. The SNP and Greens voted against it. And the justification was, from the Justice Secretary, that the UK's leading expert did not think it was necessary and not required. There was then some very secretive clarification about that, where we understood that she misrepresented Professor Alexis's views, but it was all very quiet. The Justice Secretary doubled down and said, no, I didn't misrepresent her views. But now Alexis Jay has come out herself and said Scotland needs an independent review. So it's clear to me that Angela Constance misled Parliament, doubled down on that, and this isn't over something insignificant. This is the abuse of some of our most vulnerable children and girls in Scotland. It's utterly unforgivable.
Now, we're going to have this debate in the Scottish Parliament later with Labour, the Labour group in Holyrood, saying there needs to be some clarification on what the current investigation is, what are Police Scotland doing, what's the oversight there. This is quite late for Scottish Labour to be talking about this, bringing in this concern. You are one of the very few politicians in Scotland talking about this issue. How's that been, being a Labour MP north of the border calling for this, while there's been, I sense from you, quite a lot of frustration about the rest of the country perhaps not engaging with this at the establishment level?
So the first thing I would say is Scotland has been quite slow in general. The turning point was the national inquiry in England and Wales. But it's only come to the Scottish Parliament previously once in recent years, and Scottish Labour and the Conservative Party voted for a review, an inquiry. Things are starting to shift now, not least because of the investigation that you did with Taylor, and I'm just really delighted now that people are now talking about it in Scotland. The Scottish Government has tried to say there's nothing to see here, we're exceptional in Scotland. We don't abuse our children like they do in England, which is dangerous. So we're now having that conversation, and I'm delighted that it's taken place.
OK, Joanie Reid, Labour MP for East Kilbride and Straydon, thank you very much. And Eamon and Ellie, GBNews has shown the small part of just how difficult this issue is in Scotland. Speaking to Taylor, that survivor in Glasgow, and Fiona Goddard, we've seen case studies showing that Police Scotland had failed to investigate the problem. With Alexis Jay now coming out and saying there needs to be a review and there's mounting pressure from opposition parties, I have to say, I think an audit or some form of further investigation now seems inevitable in Scotland, and not for a long time.
OK, Charlie and Joanie, thank you so much for that conversation and for bringing that to us this morning. Thank you.
There's nothing more important than keeping your money and your identity safe online. And with so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. But this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GB News viewers. ExpressVPN is offering up to 73% off, plus 4 extra months free. That's top-level security from just £2.49 a month, and you're covered by their 30-day money-back guarantee. So just click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code now. Remember, when you're online, you are often sharing personal data, so hackers can steal your information, your passwords, your photos, and your bank details in just seconds. But ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. So why choose ExpressVPN? Well, it couldn't be easier to use. With just one click, you are protected. And ExpressVPN uses military-grade AES 256 encryption, which is the same standard trusted by the US government to guard their classified information. With their new tiered plans, you can protect up to 14 devices at once and manage passwords securely. Live chat support is available 24/7, and it typically connects you in under a minute with a real person. Click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code to get up to 73% off ExpressVPN, plus 4 extra months free. Start protecting yourself today with ExpressVPN.
Now, Scottish Labour is going to urge the government today to clarify whether a grooming gang inquiry will be held north of the border and call for independent oversight of Police Scotland's reviews.
Well, GB News' national reporter Charlie Peters joins us in the studio now. Charlie, quite an interesting mix-up here, how the SNP seem to have misrepresented Alexis Jay's view.
And they're in real trouble here, I think, because they've resisted this call for an inquiry for so long. It now feels inevitable that they will have to call for a review, perhaps as early as today. I think it's highly likely we could see some movement from the Scottish Government on this, because they have said consistently for the last few months They've got a strategic group that's looking at this issue, that they're going to take an informed decision based on what the police and what health and what social services and all these authorities tell them. But at the same time, we've been able to put forward testimony from victims in Scotland. We've been able to speak to people who feel as though, and we've had evidence to show this as well, that the police in Scotland haven't done enough to look at this problem, that opportunities were missed and that women and girls were not protected. For them to also say, as Angela Constance, the Justice Secretary, did, that Alexis J does not want an inquiry, and for her to now say that she does, that puts additional pressure on the government. But this issue definitely is not going away. I think some of our viewers were concerned that it might. Last month, when we reported on the testimony of Taylor and her experience of being abused in Glasgow, there wasn't an immediate reaction in Scotland to that, but other outlets did eventually pick up the story, especially after Taylor wrote an open letter to the First Minister, John Swinney. We've had more reporting north of the border on this issue. Other survivors like Fiona Goddard in Bradford speaking about her experiences of being trafficked to Glasgow as well. So there's no way out of this for the SNP. They've got this debate later with Scottish Labour raising this issue in the chamber. But by then, perhaps we could see some movement from the government in reaction to all this pressure, in reaction to the testimony from survivors who have been front and centre of this discussion. They've been clear what they want, Miriam. They do want an audit, an inquiry, a further investigation. Perhaps they might get one announced today.
Charlie Peters, thank you very much. I know you'll be keeping us updated throughout the day if anything does change.
Significant update coming from Scotland overnight, because it's not just the Scottish Labour Party calling for clarification from the Scottish Government. We've also heard from Alexis J, the eminent professor and social worker who led the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse across the country. She's now said that an inquiry or a review is needed in Scotland, putting additional pressure onto the Scottish Government, the SNP there, because John Swinney, the First Minister, said earlier this year that he didn't think an inquiry was necessary. Then this channel interviewed and shared a story of a survivor known as Taylor, who revealed and shared social care records demonstrating that she had been abused and that Police Scotland had missed several opportunities to intervene and investigate her case. She said at least 10 men, Pakistanis in Glasgow, had abused her. We also spoke to Fiona Goddard, the Bradford victim and campaigner, who said that she was trafficked to Glasgow from Yorkshire for the purposes of abuse, and where she was also involved in drug smuggling with that gang. Now, as part of this discussion, there's also additional controversy for the government, because the Justice Secretary, Angela Constance, she had said earlier this year that Alexis J did not want an inquiry. She was also put under pressure to clarify those remarks. Well, let's speak now to Megan Gallagher, the MSP for the Scottish Conservatives. Some more on this. Good morning, Megan.
Good morning.
Now, what can you tell me about what you're expecting from the Labour Party this afternoon, putting pressure on the SNP to clarify their stance? Do the Conservatives want the same?
Well, of course, the Scottish Conservatives have been calling for a grooming gangs inquiry for months, having tabled amendments to a bill back in September that would have instructed the government to hold an inquiry into grooming gangs in Scotland. That, of course, was voted down by the SNP and their Green partners. But again, we're hoping from this debate today that we're able to find out the clarification from the Scottish Government in relation to whether they will hold an inquiry now, because we know an inquiry is needed, not just to bring those who have been involved in grooming gangs circles to justice, but also to make sure that victims are supported. Because again, there should never be a circumstance where a victim of a grooming gangs ring has to plead with the First Minister of Scotland to hold a grooming gangs inquiry. I find that absolutely disgusting, and that's why we need an inquiry.
Pleading is very much what Taylor has done with an open letter she wrote, and also in interviewing with us, sharing her story, very much demanding that inquiry. But also onto the wider political discussion here. We have heard from Joanie Reid MP, Scottish Labour MP, saying that Angela Constance, the Justice Secretary, should resign after saying that Alexis Jay didn't want an inquiry. She's now come out last night and said that she does want one, clarifying that stance. Do you agree with Joanie Reid that the Justice Secretary should resign?
Well, I think the behaviour shown by the Justice Secretary has been nothing short of a farce. There's been circumstances where the Justice Secretary should have come to Parliament in order to answer questions by opposition MSPs, and instead she sent a junior minister to go out and do her bidding for her. So I think that shows the lack of interest that's been shown by the Justice Secretary in relation to grooming gangs. I mean, I do believe that the government's position overall is no longer it's untenable because of the intervention, not just from Professor Alexis Jay, but of course the unprecedented intervention by the NSPCC last week, who came out to say that we don't know the true scale or nature of grooming gangs in Scotland. So it'll be interesting actually to see how this debate develops this afternoon, whether or not the Justice Secretary will actually show up for this debate, or if she's going to send out a junior minister once more, because again, we need leadership, and the Scottish Government have not shown leadership in this area.
Megan Gallagher, the government have said that they have a strategic group which is assessing files from police and health records to review whether an inquiry is needed. What could possibly be the resistance against an investigation now, particularly with all of this pressure that we're hearing?
There shouldn't be any resistance to an inquiry. I think the behaviour shown by, and as I said, the Justice Secretary, it's been an attempt to shut down the debate almost. Any time the issue of grooming gangs has been raised in the Scottish Parliament, the government has found an excuse or a way to misrepresent what others have been saying in relation to grooming gangs. I mean, the strategic group that you raised produced a 27-page report on child abuse and exploitation, but again, there was not one mention of grooming gangs within that report. Okay. So again, that's why we need this inquiry. We need to know the true scale and nature of how grooming gangs operate in Scotland. But again, I'm wondering whether the Scottish Government believes that grooming gangs have stopped at the border between England and Scotland. But we know, of course, that there has been instances where grooming gangs have been operating.
Sure. And many of those instances we've been reporting on here. Megan Gallagher, MSP, thank you very much for your time.